Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The barrel of the executioner's pistol was cold against his temple, but the eyes staring down at him were colder. Any final words, traitor? Kalen spat blood onto the pristine white boots of the man standing over him. The red splatter a violent contrast against the immaculate uniform of the high enforcer. Rain lashed down on the execution platform, blurring the neon skyline of Neo-Viridia, but Kalen didn't blink. He looked up, locking eyes with Valerius, the man who held the gun, the man who ruled the city with an iron fist, and the man who, a lifetime ago, had sworn to love him until the stars burned out. Just one, Kalen rasped, his voice wrecked from weeks of interrogation, his silver hair matted to his forehead. He leaned into the gun, a feral grin cutting through his bruised face. Liar. Valerius didn't flinch. His expression remained a mask of porcelain perfection, beautiful and terrifying. But for a fraction of a second, the hand holding the weapon trembled, a microscopic waver that only a lover would notice. Execute him. The Supreme Chancellor's voice boomed from the hovering drone above them. Valerius's jaw tightened. He leaned in, the pistol sliding from Kalen's temple to the hollow of his throat. The world held its breath. Then, the sky exploded. 6 hours earlier, the citadel of Neo-Viridia had been a fortress of silence. It was a city divided. The upper tier, a paradise of glass and light where the genetically enhanced paragons lived, and the lower sectors, a smog-choked slum where the dregs fought for scraps. Kalen was the wolf of Sector 4, the leader of the Red Dawn Rebellion. Valerius was the sword of the state, a paragon of the highest order. By all laws of their world, they were natural enemies. By the laws of logic, their paths never should have crossed. But fate is rarely logical. Decades ago, before the walls went up, there had been a unified academy. That was where Kalen, the scholarship boy with dirt under his fingernails and fire in his soul, had met Valerius, the heir to the High Council. It started with rivalry, bruising spars in the combat arena, intellectual debates that turned into shouting matches in the library. It ended with stolen kisses in the ventilation shafts and promises whispered against skin in the dead of night. They will try to break us, Valerius had said then, his fingers tracing the scar on Kalen's hip. Asterisk, let them try. I will burn this city to ash before I let them touch you. Asterisk. But he hadn't burned the city. He had joined the establishment. On the day of graduation, Valerius accepted the title of High Enforcer. He stood by the Chancellor's side as the walls were built, separating the sectors. He watched as Kalen was deported to the slums. He never sent a letter. He never looked back. Or so Kalen thought. Now, Kalen sat in the holding cell of the Ministry of Justice. The magnetic cuffs bit into his wrists, humming with dampening fields that suppressed his biotic strength. He was tired. The rebellion had failed. His team was scattered or dead. And the man coming to interrogate him was the ghost that had haunted his nightmares for 10 years. The heavy blast door hissed open. Valerius walked in. He had dismissed the guards, a breach of protocol that would have had anyone else court-martialed. But Valerius was the law. He placed a metal briefcase on the interrogation table and sat down, crossing his long, elegant legs. His uniform was tailored to perfection, hugging broad shoulders and a narrow waist. He looked like a god of war carved from ice. You look terrible, Kalen, Valerius said, his voice a smooth baritone that vibrated in Kalen's chest. And you look like a dog on a golden leash, Kalen shot back, leaning his head against the cold wall. Did you come to gloat? Or does the Chancellor want you to dirty your hands personally this time? Valerius ignored the barb. He opened the briefcase. Inside were not torture devices, but a sterile medical kit and a small, humming data drive. Turn around, Valerius commanded. Go to hell. Valerius stood up. In 2 strides he closed the distance, grabbing Kalen by the shoulder and spinning him around. Kalen tried to struggle, but the dampeners left him weak as a kitten. Valerius pinned him against the table, not roughly, but with an unyielding firmness. Stay still, Valerius whispered, his breath hot against Kalen's ear. The cameras are on a loop, but the audio sensors are sensitive to heart rate. Panic, and they'll know. Kalen froze. What? Valerius's hands, usually gloved in black leather, were bare. He touched the open wound on Kalen's back, a lost whip burned from his capture. His touch was clinical, yet agonizingly gentle as he applied a cooling gel. "Why didn't you leave the city when the riots started?" Valerius murmured, his voice dropping the commanding facade. It sounded strained, human. "I left the north gate unguarded for a full hour. I gave you a path." Kalen twisted his head, trying to see Valerius's face. "That was a trap. We would have been slaughtered. It was an exit." Valerius hissed, his composure cracking. "I assigned the rookies to that sector. You could have walked right through them. Why are you so stubborn?" "Because I don't run." Kalen snapped. "And I don't take favors from the man who destroyed my life." Valerius stopped. His hand rested on Kalen's shoulder, his thumb brushing the nape of his neck. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through Kalen that had nothing to do with the torture devices. "I didn't destroy your life, Kalen," Valerius said softly. "I saved it." Kalen laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? You stood there 10 years ago while they dragged me to the slums. You didn't lift a finger. If I had lifted a finger, the council would have executed you on the spot," Valerius said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "The order was already signed. Subversive element to be liquidated. The only way to buy your life was to trade mine. I pledged absolute loyalty to the Chancellor. I became his dog, his enforcer, his monster. Also, he would commute your sentence to exile." The silence in the room was deafening. Kalen stared at the metal table, his world tilting on its axis. Every hatred, every ounce of bile he had nursed for a decade. Was it based on a lie? "You never told me," Kalen whispered. "I couldn't. The Chancellor has telepaths in his court. If I had known the truth, if I had harbored even a spark of rebellion or hope, they would have sensed it. I had to believe I hated you. I had to convince myself you were nothing to me." Valerius leaned down, his forehead resting against Kalen's shoulder. "God, Kalen, do you know how hard it is to look at the only thing that matters in the world and force yourself to feel nothing?" Kalen turned slowly. The dampeners were still humming, but the fight had drained out of him. He looked up at Valerius. The ice was gone. The High Enforcer's eyes were rimmed with red, swimming with a decade of unshed tears. "So why now?" Kalen asked. "Why break cover now?" "Because the Chancellor knows," Valerius said, pulling back and resuming his cold mask as footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. "He knows I manipulated the patrol routes. He knows I hesitated during the riots. Today is your execution, Kalen, and he expects me to pull the trigger. So we're dead either way," Kalen concluded. "No," Valerius said, reaching into the briefcase and pulling out a small, metallic disc. "You're going to die, and I'm going to kill you." Before Kalen could react, Valerius jammed the disc onto Kalen's chest. A shockwave of pain hit him, stopping his heart instantly. Darkness took him. The execution platform. The present, The gunshot echoed like a thunderclap. Kalen's body jerked backward, tumbling off the platform and into the churning black waters of the canal below. The crowd cheered. The Chancellor, watching from his drone, nodded in approval. "Well done, High Enforcer. Your loyalty is absolute." Valerius holstered his weapon. He stared down at the dark water, his face impassive. "Long live the state," he said, his voice void of emotion. But inside his sleeve, a biomonitor on his wrist beeped once. A single, rhythmic pulse. Alive. Valerius turned on his heel and marched toward the exit. He had exactly 20 minutes before the neurotoxin bullet he had fired, designed to simulate death while putting the body into extreme metabolic stasis, wore off. He had 20 minutes to get to the extraction point in the sewers beneath the canal. If he was late, Kalen would drown for real. Valerius moved through the Citadel corridors. He walked with the arrogance of a man who owned the building. He bypassed security checkpoints with a wave of his hand. But as he reached the service elevator that led to the lower waste management levels, a voice stopped him. "Going somewhere, Valerius?" Valerius froze. He turned slowly. Standing at the end of the corridor was General Rax, a brute of a man and Valerius's rival for the Chancellor's favor. Rax was flanked by 4 heavily armed Praetorian guards. Inspection of the waste outflow, Valerius lied smoothly. "We can't have the rebel's body clogging the filters. It sends a bad message." Rax smiled, revealing gold-capped teeth. "Funny. The Chancellor just ordered a scan of the canal. No body was found. The currents are strong, but not that strong. Valerius didn't speak. He calculated the odds. 5 opponents. He was armed with a standard-issue sidearm and a concealed vibroblade. They had heavy pulse rifles. He suspected you, Rax said, unholstering his weapon. He said you were too perfect. Too cold. Everyone has a breaking point, Valerius. And that slum rat was yours. Valerius sighed. He reached up and unclasped the high collar of his white uniform, undoing the top button. It was the first time in 10 years he had looked untidy. You're right, Rax, Valerius said. He was my breaking point. Valerius moved. He was a blur of white and silver. He didn't go for his gun. He closed the distance. He slid under the first pulse blast, the heat singing his hair, and drove his palm into the first guard's throat, crushing the windpipe. The corridor erupted in chaos. Valerius fought not with the rigid discipline of a soldier, but with the desperate ferocity of a wild animal. He used the second guard as a human shield, taking 3 rounds to the man's Kevlar vest before snapping his neck and throwing him into Rax. A laser bolt grazed Valerius's arm, cauterizing the flesh instantly. He didn't feel it. All he could see was the timer in his head. 12 minutes. He drew the vibroblade. It hummed with a violet light. He severed the barrel of the third guard's rifle and spun, kicking the man into the wall with enough force to crack the concrete. Rax was backing away, firing wildly. Traitor, you're a dead man. I've been dead for 10 years, Valerius snarled. He threw the vibroblade. It spun through the air and embedded itself in Rax's shoulder, pinning him to the elevator door. Rax screamed, dropping his gun. Valerius strode forward, stepping over the groaning bodies of the guards. He ripped the blade out of Rax's shoulder and punched the elevator call button with his bloody hand. Tell the Chancellor, Valerius panted, staring into Rax's terrified eyes, that the High Enforcer resigns. The doors opened. Valerius stepped in and hit the button for the sublevels. As the doors closed, he slumped against the metal wall, clutching his bleeding arm. 8 minutes. The sewers were a labyrinth of filth and rushing water. Valerius ran, his pristine white boots splashing through the muck. He reached the filtration grate where the canal outflow emptied. There was nothing there. Valerius's heart hammered against his ribs. No, he whispered. No, the current calculation was perfect. He scanned the dark water. Nothing but garbage and sludge. Had the stasis worn off early? Had Kalen woken up and drowned in the panic? Kalen! Valerius screamed, his voice echoing off the damp walls. A hand shot out of the water, gripping the rusty metal grating of the walkway. Valerius dropped to his knees. He grabbed the hand, Kalen's hand, and pulled. Kalen was heavy, dead weight, coughing up water as Valerius hauled him onto the metal grate. Kalen rolled onto his back, gasping, his chest heaving. The stasis was fading, leaving his body racking with tremors. He looked up, eyes unfocused, until they landed on Valerius. Valerius was a mess. His white uniform was stained with blood, sewage, and soot. His hair was in disarray. He looked beautiful. You, Kalen coughed, a weak smile forming. You actually shot me. I had to make it look convincing. Valerius choked out, pulling Kalen into a crushing embrace. He buried his face in Kalen's wet neck, shaking. I thought I lost you. I thought I miscalculated. Kalen wrapped his arms around Valerius, feeling the tremors in the other man's body. For the first time, he realized the immense weight Valerius had been carrying. The loneliness. The terror. We have to go, Valerius said, pulling back. They'll track my biosignal. I have a stealth hover skiff hidden in the old drainage pipes. It can get us to the Badlands. The Badlands? Kalen asked as Valerius helped him stand. There's nothing out there but radiation and dust. And freedom, Valerius said. We can never come back here, Kalen. We'll be hunted for the rest of our lives. No luxury, no power, no revolution. Just survival. Kalen looked at the man who had given up a kingdom for him. He looked at the sewage-stained uniform, the symbol of the authority Valerius had just dismantled for the sake of one life. Kalen took Valerius's hand, lacing their fingers together. I never wanted a revolution, Kalen said softly. I just wanted you. The escape was not clean. They reached the hover skiff just as the drone swarm arrived. The cavern lit up with laser fire. Valerius shoved Kalen into the pilot seat and laid down suppressing fire with a stolen pulse rifle. "Get the engines hot," Valerius shouted over the roar of explosions. "I can't leave you. I'm right behind you." Valerius took a hit to the ribs, the armor absorbing most of the impact but cracking a bone. He grunted, stumbling back toward the skiff. Kalen reached out, grabbing him by the collar and hauling him into the cockpit just as a missile struck the platform they had been standing on. The skiff shot forward, riding the shockwave out of the tunnel and into the blinding gray light of the Badlands. They flew for hours, until the silhouette of Neo Viridio was nothing but a glowing smudge on the horizon. The skiff ran out of fuel near the ruins of an old pre-war cathedral, its stone spire piercing the smog clouds. They stumbled out, collapsing onto the dusty ground. The sun was setting, painting the toxic sky in hues of violent orange and purple. Valerius lay on his back, staring up at the sky. He was in pain, bleeding, and stripped of everything that had defined him for a decade. He was no longer a high enforcer. He was a fugitive. He started to laugh. Kalen crawled over to him, hovering above him. "You're losing it, Val." "Maybe," Valerius wheezed, reaching up to cup Kalen's face. His thumb brushed away a smudge of dirt. "But for the first time in 10 years. I can breathe." Kalen leaned down and kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, tasting of blood and survival and years of wasted time. It was an apology and a promise all wrapped into one. When they pulled apart, Kalen rested his forehead against Valerius's. "We have nothing," Kalen whispered. "We have different paths now," Valerius corrected him. "The general is dead. The enforcer is dead. Now, we just have to figure out who we are." Kalen looked out at the desolate horizon. It was a hard road ahead. They would be cold, hungry, and hunted. But as he looked back at Valerius, who was watching him with eyes that held the softness of the boy he had met in the academy library, Kalen knew one thing. They were finally close enough to touch. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf, by shedding his own skin to save him. If you enjoyed seeing Valerius burn down his world for the man he loved, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a lover who tortured you to save your life? Or is that a betrayal too deep to heal? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,